Hello everyone. Back again with film recaps. In this video, I'm going to recap one of an action thriller films from 2013, titled Vendetta. Before we get to the storyline, I'd like to wish everyone a happy and great day. Without further ado, let's get straight to the storyline. As the movie starts, we see an airplane landing on the runway. The scene then cuts to a car, where the protagonist of the story, Jimmy Vickers, a special ops interrogation officer, is listening to an old message from a woman who sounds like his mother, who is expecting to see him soon and hopes he reaches home safely. The man appears to be in great distress while he's going back home. Once he reaches home, he listens to another voicemail from his friend, Griffin, who consoles him and feels sorry about the loss. It is suggested that some tragedy has occurred, and Jimmy is in great distress due to it. Later on, Jimmy goes to a bar. He then inquires to the owners, Debs and Terry, if they know anything about the incident. Terry denies having any information, so Jimmy claims that Terry lives only 50 yards away from Jimmy's parents' house, enough for him to hear their screams. Terry seems displeased about it, and asks Jimmy to leave if he is here to cause some trouble. Depressed and furious at what is happening, Jimmy grabs Terry by his collar, and fights with a stranger. Debs then stops him and asks Terry to tell him what he knows. Terry finally informs Jimmy about calling the fire service that night, and he reveals that he saw 4 of the gang members. They broke into the house, and he heard the scream of Jimmy's dad, but only watched from the window because he was scared to intervene. The events so far are adding up, and later we see Jimmy in the burnt garage at the house where supposedly his parents were killed. He looks around and reminisces about his mom and dad from an old photo he found in the room. We are then transported back to a few days ago, in the same house when Jimmy's parents are alive. Jimmy's mom asks his dad, George, to mow the lawn since he is coming back, and she wants the place to look clean. Both of them can't wait for Jimmy to get home, and his dad agrees to mow the lawn when the dad gets back home later. On the other side of the story, 4 gang members are snorting illegal substances in the car while they wait for their next target. One of them assures them that their next target goes on the money run every day. Then we see a girl leaving the building to deposit money in the bank. The gangsters get alert and put on their rabbit masks, and follow the girl's car. The gangsters eventually intercept the girl at the end of the road, and drag her out of her car. One of the gang members searches the car for the money, but can't find it. And all of a sudden, Jimmy's father George, who happens to be driving by, stops at the scene immediately. The goons ask George to leave, and one of them hits him with a baseball bat. But George manages to punch him, and smash his head open. Then he faces the rest of them, and asks them to leave. One of the members is pointing a knife towards George to warn him, but they eventually flee the scene as they hear the police siren. Soon the police arrive at the scene. In his statement, George tells the police he just wanted to stop him and had no intentions to kill him. Chief Inspector Holland sarcastically says you should have thought that before swinging the baseball bat. He proceeds to arrest George on suspicion of manslaughter. Later that day, the remaining 3 thugs approach their boss, Warren, and inform him how the theft didn't go as planned. When Warren asks about his brother, he is shocked to learn about his death. Enraged by his brother's loss, Warren orders the gangsters not to return here until George dies. When George returns home after getting bail, the thugs, including Warren, follow him to the house and knock at his door. 2 guys get around the front door and knock, while the other 2 get around the back of the house. One of them then says that he's going to assault the mother. George is being held against a wall with a knife on his mouth, and the same goon who pointed his knife at him tells him that he shouldn't have acted as a hero that day. The gangsters then tie the couple to the chair in the garage, and pour petrol all over them. As the couple whimper, Warren lights the room and burns them alive.
Say goodbye to her.
The scene then cuts to the present day, where Jimmy is standing in the same burnt garage. His police friend, Griffin, shows up and informs Jimmy that one of the neighbors saw a black BMW speeding around 11 on the same night, but they never got a chance to read the number plate. Griff thinks there is a high chance that the gang involved in a conflict with George has murdered him, but the police have no proof against them. After instructing Griff to send him the CCTV footage of the theft, Jimmy leaves the garage with tears in his eyes. The following morning, Jimmy pays respect to the grave of his parents. As he is in the church, his wife, Morgan, shows up. Here we learn that Morgan and Jimmy were on the verge of divorce before this tragedy. Morgan says that he missed the funeral despite her mailing him 5 times. But after realizing that Jimmy is going through a rough patch, she consoles him that he doesn't have to be alone, and he could stop by her flat sometime. The following day, Griff arranges a meeting with Jimmy, and tells him that the black BMW belongs to Warren, who according to the investigation is the brother of Warren, accidentally killed by George that day. He then provides Jimmy with the CCTV footage of that robbery. At night, when Warren leaves the gym, someone bumps into his car from behind. He gets out of his car, only to find Jimmy waiting inside the car behind, and starts badmouthing the wrong guy.
What the fuck?
Jimmy, belonging to Special Ops, takes little to no time to overwhelm Warren and knocks him out. When Warren wakes up afterwards, he finds himself tied to the front seat, with Jimmy spilling the petrol all over his car. Jimmy reminds him about the couple he murdered 2 weeks ago, and Warren explodes in anger, claiming he did the right thing. Instead of repenting for what he did, he explains to Jimmy how he sexually assaulted Jimmy's mother that night. While controlling his emotions, Jimmy asks the bad guy to name his gang members, and he'll let him go in return.
So you take that, take that.
Once Warren writes down the names, Jimmy lights a cigarette.
Let me go! Hey man! Man, are you sending me out of there? Sending me go back, please!
Later, he heads his way to Morgan's place, but is unable to talk long due to a stab wound. When he gets up, Morgan realizes something is wrong with him. Seeing the blood on his shirt, the woman takes him inside, where she stitches the wounds. Although the couple was about to get a divorce, the incident brought them closer to each other, resulting in Jimmy spending the night at Morgan's place. On the following day, Warren's death has made the headlines, but everyone knows about his drug-dealing profession and criminal background. When one of the thugs, Rob, learns about the accident, he and Leon dash towards Warren's business partner, Caleb, who they think might have killed Warren due to their conflict on percentages. The duo knocks at his door and confronts him. But Caleb doesn't know what they are talking about. After being saved by his girlfriend, Caleb denies the allegations and threatens Rob and Leon not to return to his block again. At night, Griff visits Jimmy and advises him not to punish the criminals alone. But unlike Griff, Jimmy thinks that the corrupted system in society will never stop these gangsters who are affecting almost every family in town. They only take the statement and process it, while the culprits laugh at them and spit in their faces. Griff is at the crime scene afterwards, where a man gets murdered during an armed robbery. Here Griff finally realizes the flaws in the police department, when Chief Inspector Holland neglects the armed robbery and the victims, by blatantly saying that the shopkeeper shouldn't have retaliated. When Griff gets emotional and says that the man was protecting his livelihood, Holland instructs him to take a chill pill. According to Holland, the man's wife will claim the insurance, get a huge payout, and everyone will be happy. Meanwhile, Jimmy keeps the hunt going, and moves on to the next member of the gang, Ryan.
Come on then!
He takes him to an abandoned place, ties him to a chair, and puts a mouth clamp on his face. Knowing all kinds of tortures any special ops investigator would do, the pursuit of vengeance takes over Jimmy. He pours cement into Ryan's mouth, making him swallow and suffocate to death. The following day, the police find Ryan's body hardened from the top to the stomach due to the cement. DCI Holland shows strong interest, and believes this is the case that can give him a decent promotion. Following that, Terry the bar owner shows Holland CCTV footage of his bar, where they can see Jimmy is taking a passed out guy in the back of his car. Although Debs advises him not to reveal the video, Terry doesn't want his pub to burn down like George's house. The police question Morgan about Jimmy, and she lies as Jimmy hides in her apartment. Later, Jimmy is in the mart, where 2 policemen start to follow him. Just as they are about to arrest him, a car stops suddenly. 2 well-built men get out and assault the officers, allowing Jimmy to escape with them. At this point, Jimmy is surprised to see Colonel Leach getting out of that car. Since Jimmy is a valuable asset to the special ops, the colonel himself comes to take him back. He gives Jimmy 48 hours more to clean his shit, implying to get over with the remaining gang members, after which he has to return to his job. On the other hand, Griff approaches his colleague, Joe, the SWAT leader, and tells him that this case shouldn't be taken seriously. Suspecting something fishy, Joe inquires if Griff knows the killer. Griff then tells the truth that he is a friend of Jimmy whose parents were brutally killed. As Joe still thinks that Jimmy is out of control, Griff says that Holland is no different, and that he is only taking this case seriously to become a superintendent, which will probably ruin the department with his corruption and negligence. Back to Jimmy, he goes about his revenge as he knows he has the backing of the army and he cannot get caught. While Leon is sitting in the strip club, he receives an envelope with the dead Ryan's picture in it. Suspecting danger, the thug escapes the club and runs, until he gets knocked down by Jimmy. After regaining consciousness, Leon finds himself confined to the ground, with his lower body chained to the gate and his upper body to the car. Leon has no idea why he is being tortured, which infuriates Jimmy even more. As a result, Jimmy shows no mercy. He gets in the car and races it at full speed, leaving his body in two pieces. On the next day, Colonel Leach runs into DCI Holland in a restaurant. He asks Holland to hand him everything the police got on Jimmy, and states that Jimmy belongs to the army and not him. Hearing this, Holland refuses that if the colonel takes the law into his hands, he belongs in jail. Colonel Leach then goes on to explain Jimmy's courage by recalling an event from 2009. He states that the army found the terrorist who planned a major attack on the British mainland, but the terrorist refused to disclose any information about it. However, it only took Jimmy 10 minutes with the terrorist alone to make him spit his guts. He says that people like Jimmy do not fear death, they welcome him. Lastly, he warns that Jimmy will finish up on these guys and vanish into thin air. DCI Holland accepts the challenge, and declares to find Jimmy. Colonel leaves by warning Holland that if he ever lays a finger on Jimmy, he will come down so hard on Holland. On the next scene, we see that the police superintendent and commissioner of police meet the army chief on short notice. The army chief gets straight to the point and says Jimmy, the subject of the ongoing investigation, should not be taken into custody under any circumstance. Without revealing much about Jimmy, the officials tell the superintendents how Jimmy is crucial for Britain's top secret agencies. The army hierarchy asked the higher-ups in the police to report directly on the development of this investigation. Later that night, the last remaining member of the gang, Rob, who was part of the group that killed Jimmy's parents, is being taken outside some drug dealer. Jimmy makes him knock on the door, and uses him as a shield, although Rob flees from the scene later. He kills all the remaining drug dealers of the gang, except for Caleb, Warren's business partner. Jimmy ties him to the chair, and stirs some chemicals together in a bucket, which is the same chemicals the dealers use to prepare the drugs. Jimmy then proceeds to dissolve all the cash in the bucket, before eventually pouring the chemical over the guy's head and melting him alive. Meanwhile, DCI Holland realizes that Constable Griffin has been providing intel to Jimmy from the beginning, so he asks him who's next on Jimmy's radar. However, Griffin refuses to tell him, and asks to stay out of Jimmy's way, but Holland seems unreluctant to find Jimmy, and goes against the order of his superintendent. He then tracks down the last gang member in the hospital who fled the scene last night. The limping guy is in Jimmy's apartment looking at some letters in the next scene. Sometime later, Jimmy chases him down, and makes him drive near the seaport. He makes the guy sit down on his knees with his hands tied, and takes out a syringe, claiming that this is the most dangerous aerosol spray that will burn someone inside. Rob then spits on Jimmy, and asks him to look at the trunk of his car. To his surprise, it turns out that Rob has killed Morgan before Jimmy can kill him. In utter disbelief and exhaustion, Jimmy empties his gun's magazine into Rob, right as a SWAT team escorted by Holland arrive on the scene. Griff arrives too, and confronts Holland about letting Rob go from the hospital, and letting him kill Jimmy's wife. Holland says he let him go so the guy could lead him to Jimmy, but he did not know he would kill his wife. Seeing Holland's reality, the SWAT captain, Joe, asks his squad to stand down, which leaves Holland stunned.
The suspects fled the scene on foot.
They let a broken Jimmy walks off the scene, while Holland tries to stop him alone. And before leaving the place, Jimmy punches Holland in the face, causing him to stop finally. The movie ends in an alley where a random girl is putting down trash. Two strangers obstruct and grab hold of her as she screams for help. On the other end of the alley, Jimmy appears. The thugs confront Jimmy and ask him to leave, and the screen goes dark with an evil smile of Jimmy. Okay guys, that's all the recap of Vendetta 2013. Thanks for watching. See you again in the next video.